Figure it out. Hey, this Hangout on Air is live. Good evening. It is the Audible live here, footballguys.com podcast, our video show, youtube.com/footballguys, DOTCOM. First one in the chat room, raise your hand as we continue on with the discussion about the National Football League. It is week one of the fantasy playoffs, and we've got a big game on Thursday Night Football that is not going swell for one of the teams. We'll get into that in a bit. Bloom, Waldman, yes. Gene joining the program. Gene, how are you?
I'm a little bit sad about Derek Johnson, but otherwise I'm doing well. Thank you.
Okay. Wildman, no hat, man. Isn't your head cold? Like you're gotta wear the hat, man. I haven't seen you without a hat.
It was until Derek Johnson got hurt in my IDP league team. I'm trying to beat up Batante so I can face the undefeated Bloom. And
not anymore. Batante beat me last week, actually. So.
That's because Draft Dad is pretty good. Yeah. And Sigmund Bloom's pretty good, too. What's up, dude?
You know, I always appreciate opportunities to host this show or host the Power Grid, but it's something special when the four of us are together. So, week 14. And you feel the pressure, you feel it mounting, and it's a good thing to be at this point on the NFL calendar.
Yeah, and you feel pressure mounting if you're the Raiders, although at halftime it's 21-10. They do bring it back with a Latavius Murray touchdown. But this one has been all about the freak. Bloom, before we jump into the injured players, let's get that game update.
Yeah, and this a game for the Raiders that is kind of like the Wile E. Coyote game? You know, when Wile E. Coyote runs off the cliff and there's no ground underneath him, and then he looks and realizes there's no ground, and that's when he falls. Now, not that the Raiders didn't show that they measured up to Denver, and the win over Tampa at Tampa looks like a really good win now. But still, this did not seem like a team that we felt sure was on the level of a Steelers or Ravens, Patriots old guard. And you're seeing trouble getting the engine to turn over on offense. They got a field goal basically off of a Tyreek Hill muffed punt. They finally, Kansas City drives down the field behind Alex Smith's vertical passing to Chris Conley to Tyreek Hill on a long touchdown. Beautiful touch pass leading Travis Kelce on a third down for 30 or 35 yards. A lot of run after catch there. Kelce looking fantastic. There was another improvisational play where he almost crossed the line of scrimmage and barely kept himself on the right side to hit Chris Conley for another play. Conley with 2 receptions for 70 yards in this game. Kershaw Kendrick West finishing a drive instead of Spencer Ware. And Spencer Ware got stuffed on a 4th and 1, or we could be looking at even a little larger lead here for the Chiefs. But finally, Tyreek Hill with a long punt return for a touchdown. 21-3, the Raiders do answer. This happens so many games. Like the offense, it doesn't get going. You have a quarterback like Derek Carr. You up the tempo. You let him have more control. And they move down the field pretty easily. Still not a great offensive performance for Oakland, and they have to feel some urgency here. Because, we've talked about this on the show, whether it's Oakland, KC, Denver, on the NFC side of the bracket, a team like the Giants, everything could be going well through this first 3 quarters of the season. But if you don't finish in the fourth quarter, just like in the game, then it's all for naught. And the Raiders, the heart beating a little faster going into KC. And also, Kansas City, a team that handled them very soundly in their own house. So this is not what they wanted to see. And then all of a sudden we start to contend with the idea of Kansas City as a team with the first round bye and a team that maybe one of these years can overcome the disappointment after disappointment they've had in the playoffs.
Well, we'll see if Andy Reid lets them down in this one. Matt, before we get to Dr. Gene, I just feel like the Raiders can come back. They've already brought it a little bit closer. Like this is kind of going to their script we've seen before with this team.
Yeah, no doubt. And this is a situation where Carr kind of turns it up at this stage of the game. And then the Chiefs tend to be one that I could see them coming out a little flat in the second half and trying to run the ball a lot and not working out all so well.
They'll pucker up, Matt. That's what they'll do. They'll pucker up.
That's what happens after you have that grand slam breakfast that Andy Reid probably had this morning is, he's going to get the itis a little bit. As Scott Pianowski, friend of the program, talked about that Andy Reid looks like he's holding a Denny's menu instead of a play sheet. So, that might be what's going on. But really, Derek Derek Johnson losing him, as Chris Collinsworth commented on the program, is that, he's one of the best, cover linebackers in the league. So if they can exploit a little bit of the middle there now, because of the fact that D4 is more of a pass rush guy and they've got a reserve in there, in addition to that, some things can happen here. And you still have two receivers that tend to, warm up in the second half as well. It seems like Michael Crabtree needs to drop a few before he comes up with some spectacular plays in the second half. So you're right, totally on script.
Yeah, Krabby's got a little bit of that lawnmower man in him. It's what I call Demarius, where you got to it's like a bad chainsaw. You got a couple of cranks there before it gets going and getting fired up. On this show, fired up to talk with Dr. Gene Bramall, of course. Follow him on Twitter at Gene Bramall. And Dr. Gene, it's week 1 of the fantasy playoffs, so here I am again for 11 years talking about Marcy Rossman and the Marcy Rossman rule and start your studs. And if a guy like Julio Jones plays, I'm playing him. Now, would you agree with that as we watch Julio Jones struggle again with another week of practice?
I'd like to see him do something in practice tomorrow. Julio is not quite the same as Roddy White was. Roddy White's practice participation always told us what we needed to know. If he was back to a full practice by the end of the week, he was going to be fine. If not, he was going to be limited and darn near a decoy. That's not always been the case with Julio. If Julio's on the field, they're going to use him, or at least try to use him as they normally would. I'm not really sure which way this is going to go. The Falcons have sounded optimistic all week long, but they haven't done anything to make you believe that their optimism has been well-founded. Julio wasn't able to get back on the field at all, really, last Sunday. They were concerned enough about him to send him for an MRI. He didn't practice on Wednesday, didn't practice again today. There was some indication that the reason they're holding back is because he doesn't know how to run practice reps at less than full speed. But that tells you that they're worried that he's going to aggravate it when he goes full speed. So the hope is that we see, I just don't see him DNP, and then a full practice on Friday. If that's the case, then all systems are go. Absolutely no concerns. And I agree with you. If what I expect to see is limited Friday practice, listed questionable, called a game time decision, Rappaport and Schefter saying Sunday morning he's going to play. And then I think we're going to see him limited. And whether or not we see a Sammy Watkins type 9 to 10 targets, 2 to 3 catches, and you hope he gets something around the red zone or breaks a long play, I think that may be where we get. And it's just going to be up to what who your first player up off the bench is or in your flex spot, whether or not you can tolerate a Julio that is going to have a lower floor than usual. But hopefully all this falls by the wayside on Friday and he has a good practice and we don't have to worry about it as much.
Well, as long as Rappaport doesn't say he's out for the year, I'm good with that.
Well, and it's a late game too, so we have to keep that in mind. Another late game, even though it's not a West Coast game, Gene, Tampa Bay and New Orleans, and when we get into veterans, we can have maybe a few more optimistic scenarios whenever a player misses his first 2 practices, but not the case with rookie Michael Thomas. Again, a late game. And this also obviously affects whether you want to start Willie Snead, Brandon Cooks, Kobe Fleener. We're reading tea leaves here. You can always break this down too. Like, what if we hear this tomorrow? If we hear this, like you did with Julio Jones, where do we stand with Michael Thomas?
I don't know. I got nothing. I don't think anybody has anything. There wasn't anything. If anybody out there is listening, saw something that they thought might have been meaningful in the game video, send it my way and I'll take a look at it. I didn't see anything. The local beat writers didn't notice anything. They've got no information on what this injury is. He's just listed with a foot and didn't practice on Wednesday or Thursday. The Saints, including Mark Ingram last week, have often had players where they don't practice earlier in the week, do something, and sometimes a lot of something on Friday, talk to the media, sound optimistic, and then there's not much concern after that. I have no idea what category Michael Thomas is going to be in, but I think what we hear between Friday and Sunday is the way to go there. And hopefully we hear something positive. And I think you're right. It's probably meaningful that Thomas is a rookie and Ingram and other players in the past have not been rookies. So you'd really like to see Thomas do something in practice and have an optimistic interview or two leading into the weekend. Right now, I'm pretty nervous about what's going on. You don't like to see foot injuries, and you don't like to see multiple missed practices in rookies. So tomorrow is going to be key, and hopefully we get good information on lots of these guys, and Thomas included.
You heard it here first, folks. The Gene Bramall Injury Hotline, 1-800-SQUIRRL. So as we go forward, Let's talk a little bit about
Can you tell me about the squirrel?
Don't dial that phone number, people. I'm pretty sure that's a bad idea.
I need to buy a line just to see if we can just what we can do with that right there. But Jordan Reed, you mentioned very well in your injury article that there were kind of conflicting reports. I know I read something earlier today that kind of showed that what happened was that he seemed sore early on in the practice, and then he was reaching pretty well for the ball and seemed to had much better range of motion towards the end of the practice. Just wondering, what your take on Jordan Reed is, whether he seems even remotely safe to start for fantasy leagues this weekend.
Yeah, I think this is going to be another situation. All four of these guys, really, Ingram and Thomas and Julio and Reed, are still sort of up in the air for me. I saw the report that his range of motion looked really good first, and then when I scrolled back through my Twitter feed and when I did some news searches, everything else I heard from earlier in the practice wasn't reassuring at all. And we know this is an injury that's going to take multiple weeks to heal. He's going to have to play through pain. And what that tells you is if he is hit on that shoulder, if he's driven into the ground on that shoulder, he's likely going to have to come out of the game and miss some time. And is he snap to snap? Is he series to series, as we commonly say? And, I don't know really sure how to handicap that necessarily, but there's definitely going to be some worry with him. And, they can give him a Toradol injection and they can pad it up as much as possible. But they can't freeze that shoulder in place and allow him to do what he would normally do. And it's an injury that's going to take close to 6 weeks to heal, and we're barely into 2.5 at this point. We're about 17 days after that Thursday Thanksgiving injury. So hopefully tomorrow he's able to practice. If he doesn't practice tomorrow, that's a big concern. He still has not been cleared for contact yet. We're just talking about how he looked in individual drills. So there's time for, Reed is not going to be 100% this weekend, even if he plays. So, going back to that Thursday game where he looked pretty good and he was able to get through that second half after stiffening up, that's a sign that he's willing to play through it, and he'll try to play through pain. But this is a different situation now than it was in the second half on Thanksgiving.
It is the Audible Live, and the chat room can react to me as we go back to Dr. Gene. And is Trevor Siemian going to play this week? What are your feelings on that? I did watch nothing. I sound like Rex Ryan. I did nothing but watch Trevor Siemian's feet in practice today. So I don't know about who else did what else. I said what's up to Forsett, but that was it. I mean, watching all of Siemian's feet. And I will say this, Dr. Gene. He didn't have as much bounce in his step, let's say, as like an Austin Davis, but you saw no rolling of the foot or, any sort of – he was maybe a touch ginger on some things, but he was moving, he was throwing, proper velocity, proper footwork, all that. The recovery, again, Friday's the big day for everybody, but it is now they pushed him. They give him half of the first-team reps, and they give the other half to Paxton. What would you be inclined to believe – who would you be inclined to believe is the starter this week for Denver?
Well, you feel to correct me if I'm wrong here, but based on that report, I think it's more likely than not that we see Siemian return. Lynch really hasn't been effective in either of his two short stints as the starting quarterback. Originally, the thought was that they were hoping that Siemian was going to be able to practice last Friday. That really never came to fruition, and we started being concerned that this was going to be a multi-week injury. But if they're letting him take more of the starters' reps, and he's taken reps in consecutive practices, and they're planning on him practicing tomorrow, and you're not seeing any limitations, at least much limitations with his footwork, then that sounds to me like a team that's preparing him to play, and I would expect that to be the case. So you're correct. Let's see what happens on Friday and make sure that he hasn't had any setbacks with these consecutive practices that he had, but that sounds pretty promising to me.
Gene, let's go back to the Saints and just talk about Mark Ingram. Didn't practice today. It's a similar picture to last week. I don't believe there were any telltale plays later on last week, but there were plays early in the game last week where he limped off. And really, this is a tougher matchup than what we saw last week. I think Tampa Bay on the road versus Detroit at home. What you really want to get at when you're setting your lineup is what are the chances that you're watching this game and there's a play or two when you just say, why would I start him? I know he's hurt. I know that he's missing practice. I know that in the last game he played, he limped off. is there a good argument to play Ingram? I have him, and I'll just put this in context. I have him as my number 26 running back. He's down around players like Jerick McKinnon and Terrence West. Derrick Henry, Ryan Matthews. Am I being too pessimistic?
Nope, I don't think so. First, I think one of two things, and there's really no in between that's happening here. Either they were happy enough with how he looked on Wednesday after last week's aggravation to say, there's no sense in putting you out there on Thursday. We'll let you rest, continue to get treatment. You can get it back out on the practice field on Friday. We'll list you questionable and you can play. Or that aggravation was meaningful last week. He did not feel good on Wednesday. They shut him down today. He's not going to practice tomorrow, and he'll be declared out. I think one of those things are going to happen, and I think it's probably the first rather than the second. However, you're exactly correct. Regardless of which one of those it is, I think you're going to see a whole lot more Tim Hightower than you did last week, early in the game, not just late in the game. And we've already seen Ingram go through an aggravation with this injury once. It's likely, if it's possible, if not likely, that it's going to happen again this week. So I think a very high variance situation, very hard to project him for more than 10 to 12 touches at this point, and I think he's probably somebody to be avoided. The hope is that they're not planning to let him go out there and possibly aggravate this to where it does become a multi-week injury. If there is some concern there with Tim Hightower playing well and the offense clicking, Ingram is a big part of that, but hope that he's able to rest so that he comes back at full strength sooner than later. But we're going to know tomorrow. I'm hoping it's the opposite. I'm hoping we see what we saw last week, which is he gets a pretty good practice in, talks to the media, sounds good, and is ready to go. But even if that's the case, I think it's going to be much closer to a 50-50 split than it was last week.
Gene, Terrell Williams certainly played. He played with a shoulder harness last weekend. He scored a touchdown. He also had a drop. You also wonder about how well he's going to be able to raise his arms over his head. What's your take on him? The fact that he was productive last week, does that give us encouragement that he should continue to play through this well, or is he more one hit away, kind of like Jordan Reed?
He could be one hit away. However, every single thing since the report of the labral tear has been positive. He got back to practice by the end of the week. They cleared him to play. He said the harness wasn't restrictive. He was productive during the game. He only missed 1 or 2 snaps in an important situation. He was back to a full practice on Wednesday, consecutive full practice on Thursday. There doesn't seem to be any indication that the team is worried enough about that shoulder that they want to rehab it a little bit more aggressively, that they're worried about the potential for a shoulder dislocation. But that said, the report is that he's got a torn labrum. So any of those things could happen if he falls on it in an unusual way and aggravates the injury, or has a complication because the labrum is not intact. But everything over the last 10 days has been just about as positive as you could write it up. So I think we're probably fine with Williams.
Is Dr. Gene Bramall, footballguys.com. We'll go around the bend one more time for the good doctor. And, of course, everyone turning to one Andrew Luck, limited with the shoulder for the second straight day. No concern or a little concern?
Oh, I don't think there's a concern. I think at least where I've been with Luck since the beginning of the season is that if he shows any limitations in arm strength or accuracy during a game, then I'm going to get concerned. Until that point, and again, you recognize that then it's a little bit late for that particular week, but he's looked just too good through 13 weeks to be worried about a little bit of limitation in practice when we know he's been limited either on Wednesday or Thursday in most weeks anyway. And there certainly wasn't any indication last week that he was limited, and I recognize that was against the Jets, who has arguably looked as bad as Cleveland has on defense on Monday night, and it's a shorter week, which I think has more to do with the fact that they've rested his arm a little bit more this week than in previous weeks, because it is a short week rep-wise. I would expect him to fully practice tomorrow and probably not be listed on the injury report, but it's not going to concern me too much unless we hear a local report that there's a little bit more going on this week than there has in the past.
Gene, did you know that Khalil Mack is really good at football?
He's all right. I think he's okay.
Really, really good at football. Sammy Watkins, more practice reps. Yay, confetti. Should that change your approach to whether you want to play him this week? Or does this go back to your speech on the IDP show? Like, if you need a giant game and you're weighing him against players like Pierre Garçon or something, yeah, go with Watkins, but you know what his range of outcomes is.
I still think Watkins is snap to snap. What I like about Watkins is that he was it 9 targets, 10 targets? He had very close to double-digit, if not double-digit targets last week, and spread out throughout the game. It's not that he got 6 or 7 early and then really wasn't able to do much in the second half. He had just as many targets, if not more, I think, actually in the second half than the first half. So that's pretty reassuring. We have seen Watkins play through this injury effectively before, not necessarily after he had the surgery and the hardware in place, but last year he looked really good at certain points playing through foot pain. And now that he's seemingly decided I only have to get through 1 week to the next week, I don't have to get through the next 3 months of the season like he was concerned about during the preseason and after week 2 and 3. Maybe he's a little bit better able to push through and manage his snaps. He did get a few more snaps last week as well. So I still think it's a high variance situation. He could just as easily go out in the first series as anything else just because of the nature of what that injury is right now. But that's where we are with him. So I think it does go back to that conversation. How much upside are you willing to chase, knowing that the floor is fairly low?
Jack Del Rio in a white ski cap. I'm not sure about. I can think of some things that would be funny to describe him as. But let's go forward and.
I'm a colorblind guy, but I don't understand color rush jerseys being all white. Somebody that can see color better than I am.
Color white is all color, Gene. All colors are in white light. It's on all. Maybe someone should have like prism uniforms that have the little sparkle and little rainbows on them or something.
Yeah, I'm not buying it.
That was a total Bloom explanation in the best possible way. It's the white prism. It's all the colors in it. It's all the colors in the spectrum. Devante Parker, he's having all sorts of things in the spectrum with his back. So is he going to be able to play? I mean, he didn't seem like he was going to be able to play last week. Then he played, and I thought he scored a touchdown, didn't he?
Yeah,
he did. So what do you think there? Is this going to be more about a guy who's just scared about his back, but then he gets on the field, he's going to play fine?
I still feel like I'd like to know specifically what's causing him problems. It seems like a long time to be fighting through back spasms. I suppose it's really not. There's going to be some soreness there, but I still have a little bit of concern that there's something brewing. But he was able to talk the medical staff into having him play. There were some periods where he wasn't himself last week and other periods where I feel like he looked pretty good. And he's got through 2 limited practice this week, whereas last week it was 3. He didn't practice at all. So I think they're preparing for him to play. Are they playing at home? You guys know, where's the game this week? So depending on what the weather's like, if he's in a tough situation.
It's at home and there's 20-mile-an-hour winds.
Yeah, so the wind doesn't bother me. I'm just more worried about the temperature than anything else. If the temperature is good and he's able to keep that back warm, I think he's much less likely to run into trouble this week. Should be okay.
Super quick, Dr. Gene. Michael McNair chimes in on the chat room. Any injury concerns with Lamar Miller? I'm starting him over Gore in 1 point PPR.
Don't do it.
To which I suggested, I'd go Gore. Yeah. Miller doesn't look right, Gene.
No, he doesn't. He's got multiple things going on from ankle to ribs to shoulder. Doesn't seem to be able to get through even a full quarter without being removed and without some concerns about his effectiveness. He's at least been cleared to practice on Wednesdays in each of the last 2 or 3 weeks, but there's still a concern there. And until we see him running effectively and being able to, take those 18 to 22 touches that we would prefer him to get, then it's really hard to trust. And, the Texans kept, I think, every running back on their active roster last week, which tells you where their concern level is with Miller, whereas 2 weeks ago when Alfred Blue wasn't ready and Tyler Ervin wasn't ready, they only had 2 running backs. So we'll have to wait and see how that goes. If they only have a couple of running backs active, maybe you consider it a little bit, but I don't think this week sets up very well for him right now.
Sounds like Denver and their 8 wide receivers. That is not hyperbole. Check it out. Dr. Gene, you follow him on Twitter at Gene Bramall, and of course check out his work at footballguys.com. Dr. Gene, as
Thanks,
always,
gentlemen.
Thank
Enjoy.
you. We appreciate you.
Always. See you.
See you. And we love you.
Always.
Never miss out that opportunity, Bloom, to tell someone you love them.
I love you. I love you, Cecil. I love you, Matt. I love you, television.
You fellas.
Let's get all lovey-dovey with a Chiefs choke job. What's happening here, Bloom?
Well, the defense isn't choking, though. The defense for Oakland, it was a bad decision, I think, by Alex Smith. We were able to just – it's funny because Alex Smith was having so much success as a downfield passer. And you talk about the shell up or the pucker factor, and Alex Smith does one of those short, hit the back of his drop, let the ball go passes, and I think it was T.J. Carey that was there to intercept it. But they get it in the red zone. Casey Holt's field goal, 21-13. Next drive. And now you drop back and you try to do a longer drop back pass. There's Khalil Mack. Raw, just engulfs the ball. He's so good. He's so good. Again, though, KC holds. And this time, Marquette King, who fielded a bad punt snap and got the punt away earlier tonight. It wasn't a perfect snap, but he could have handled it, mishandled the snap, and they botched that field goal attempt. So 21-13. So Oakland's defense, not their offense, Oakland's defense giving Kansas City their best shot. And so far, Kansas City is still standing. That being said, the pucker factor should only increase now.
That being said, punters shouldn't dance. Matt Waldman, what have you seen in this game tonight on the offensive side of the ball for both teams?
Well, I mean, I think when you look at this game, one of the things that was nice for Alex Smith early on is that he took advantage of Nate Allen, who played a little too shallow on that post route, and they read that right away and saw that Tyreek Hill with his 4.25 speed, there was no way that Hill was, Allen was going to be able to get back there in time. So they took advantage of that pretty well.
He was going after Kelsey on that, right? Because it was Quarter's defense, and he came up for Kelsey, and Freak went right behind him.
Yeah, and it was just one of those deals where, he was in what you would call a hard cap between 7 and 10 yards from the line of scrimmage. And so it was one of those deals where once Alex Smith took his second step and saw that there was no budging from Allen, he was like, I've got this, because there's no way, even with my corner playing 7 yards off Hill not going to beat him. So that was, you got that. And then also even Chris Conley with that deep pass is what Bloom said is, that was an early play in the first quarter against Atlanta last week, and Conley dropped that pass. So it was kind of redemption. It's still kind of right straight out of their playbook, and it just worked out well. But I think that the running game hasn't been there for them. I mean, Spencer Ware is a guy, this is a thing too. And I mean, obviously as someone who's a big fan, I look at this as a fantasy owner. I think they need to feed the ball to this guy, and they need to be more consistent about it. And Andy Reid gets too cute with like, okay, I'm going to take Spencer Ware out here, and I'm going to put Charkandrick West in there. And it's like alternating carries does not work for a back who's built like Ware. You want to wear this team down. And when you have a team that's so forgiving to the rush as the Raiders are, you want to pound this ball and control it a little bit more. So I'd like to see them try to do this rather than, be counterintuitive. And then with the Raiders, I think for them right now, it's just a matter of they're just thankful that their defense is keeping them in this game, I think, and as well as the offense. And here comes Ware, and he gets a few, but we'll see if they take him out again. So the only other thing that I can tell you that has been interesting to me that I have to say here as I stall, because I'm setting something up for you to take a look at, is I finally figured out what Jack Del Rio looks like. In this particular.
I apologize, Joe, before we even see what this picture is.
I think that if I can get this thing to show, there we go. I think that's what Del Rio kind of looks like. I mean, he's kind of got that, southern, he's got a little orange there going on. Maybe he's got a little bit of that spray-on thing going on. I mean, he was a USC guy. He probably used to tan all the time, and now he can't do it anymore because he's locked in a room somewhere. So
there's only one, Matt Waldman. Ladies and gentlemen, we're looking over your chat room, and Steve, in case of emergency, or Steve Icebloom, one of our faves here in the chat room, says he's dumping Brandon Marshall for Malcolm Mitchell.
Yes. Well, again, one of these ideas you should use when making these kinds of decisions. When you play a wide receiver or a tight end, you're also playing the quarterback in your lineup. Bryce Petty, Tom Brady.
Right. It's quite a bit different. So there we have it. Yeah. We will go on, and I really wanted to pick both of y'all's brain about Russell Wilson, kind of expand on what we said in the preview shows, Bloom, this morning, and of course on Wednesday morning as we release our preview shows. Russell Wilson in bad weather. I don't have NFLweather.com in front of me, but just looking at that, I believe there have been 2 games in his career that he's played that are, below freezing temperatures. Correct me if I'm wrong there. But, Matt, I want you to start out with that one, because this is a game where we could see, and it's going to be a Seattle defense without Earl Thomas. Chime in there if you'd like, Matt. But on the flip side of that, it's going to be Russell Wilson going to Jimmy, going to Doug Baldwin. This is a fantastic matchup for Doug Baldwin in this contest. One of the reasons why everyone should be excited about Russell Wilson can do, provided that it's okay in that weather. So, Tyler Lockett, a player you can look to with a little bit more confidence right now. Of course, you're going to look to Doug Baldwin in this one. I like Thomas Rawls more than others this week. But in a cold game in Lambeau, what should fantasy owners be expecting from Russell Wilson? And what are your expectations for Russell Wilson, Matt, in these colder temperatures?
Well, let me shoot that back to you. What are the stats, good or really bad for him?
In those two games?
Yeah.
I would just say average.
Average. Okay. Well, that's not too bad then. So, I mean, looking at it from that perspective, if he's average and it's just kind of average and the defense is not very good for Green Bay, then I'd feel pretty comfortable about going with Russell Wilson. And you have to understand that while this defensive front has good stats, I've called them a paper champion all year when it comes to facing the running game, because when they've actually faced a good running back, they haven't been all that great. So, I'm just looking at the defensive game logs of football guys. You can kind of look at some of the decent run ground games and feel like that they've done reasonably well against Green Bay's defensive front. So with that in mind, of course, you look at Seattle and you go, well, they couldn't do anything, for some weeks. And then even recently they were kind of up and down, but last week they did great against Carolina. So what gives? And I would be more inclined to look at last week as the template. And I would agree with you that Thomas Rawls is probably a very good start this week. And I do like.
Doesn't it remind you, Matt, not to interject
yeah,
there, but doesn't it remind you so much of when Rob Kelly went up against Green Bay and it was like the Packers are number 4 and Kelly had 3 touchdowns. Like when you have that type of runner, almost like a Ware, Matt. I think Spencer Ware is a rhythm runner.
Yeah.
Give him a rhythm. Spencer Ware and Thomas Rawls, he's going to get that rhythm, and that's why I feel good about him, even though on paper Green Bay is so good against the run.
And that's a great, great point, Cecil, because rhythm running is about cutback running too. And so if you can't establish the fact that you're going to go to the front side and only get 2 to 3 yards, but everybody's going to run to you, then you can never set up the cutback because you're never on the field to do it. So It's just one of those situations where Rawls certainly has that change up there, and he does very well with that, and that feeds into the play action passing game, which Russell Wilson is great at, and he's very good. You have those designed rollouts, and he's going to go deep to one side, and he's very accurate with the deep ball. So I like this game. I really do see this as probably a reasonably high-scoring game, probably, I think, somewhere in the 20s for both teams. And a lot of that does have to do with the fact that Earl Thomas, like you said, is out, and that they will probably be able to put, Jordy Nelson one-on-one with Sherman and not have great coverage over the middle to help out. And I think Jordy Nelson is good enough to beat Sherman one-on-one at least a couple of times during the game if there's decent enough targets there. And if not, he's still got Devante Adams and Randall Cobb. So it's going to be a difficult scenario. And we've always seen that Green Bay and Seattle have played reasonably high-scoring games, and they've been able to throw on each other over the past several years, and they've been some of the most exciting games in football. So I don't think that's going to change anytime, this week compared to what it's been in previous weeks.
Right. Get your popcorn ready for that one. And by the way, Matt, rhythm runner, we could expand on this certainly when we talk about the draft next year, but a rhythm runner also puts the defense in a rhythm. Like, that's why I always said when you had Jerome Bettis and Willie Parker, and I've even asked defensive players about this, like, you kind of get used to where a guy's supposed to be, right? Because of the rhythm. If you got Ware out there banging, pounding on you, and all of a sudden you put in West, that's a different rhythm. And as a defender, you have to adjust to that. And if you don't, you can get burned. Anyway, Sigmund, your thoughts on this game. Sounds like Matt and I are simpatico and looking forward to this game.
Oh yeah, definitely. And you remember Green Bay still alive at 6-6, and this is a big game for them. So I do expect that by necessity, Mike McCarthy is going to have the right offense out there. And Matt said Jordy Nelson, Devante Adams, Randall Cobb, and hopefully Ty Montgomery. And last week in the second half, after trying James Starks twice, after trying some of Kristen Michael, they went back to Ty Montgomery. Lo and behold, he had like 30-some yards on 5 carries. Looks good. Now, I don't know if they need to limit his snap count because of this sickle cell condition, but that's the right offense for Aaron Rodgers. That's the right offense for Ty Montgomery. That's the right offense to play against Seattle. So looking at Russell Wilson's fantasy outlook, and I have Rodgers as my number 2 quarterback this week. I have Russell Wilson as my number 7 quarterback. I think where it gets tougher is if you're looking at Russell Wilson against Matt Ryan or Russell Wilson. I really like Kirk Cousins this week. That's a separate conversation. But Russell Wilson played, I was looking it up while y'all were talking, 2 games in sub-freezing weather. There was a game against Kansas City in Arrowhead we're watching tonight where he had like 20 for 32, 178 yards, 2 touchdowns, 8 for 71 as a runner. So a good fantasy day. And they talked about in the article his 10 1/4 inch hands helping him in the cold weather. They mentioned that he played in Wisconsin. So he used to practicing in the cold. And then there was the game that Blair Walsh lost for Minnesota, which was what the occasion this article was written on. But I wouldn't worry about the cold for Russell Wilson. Green Bay's defense is in shambles. Doug Baldwin, Tyler Lockett's finally back. Jermaine Kearse is still an excellent receiver as a complement. Oh, and there's that guy, Jimmy Graham, also. I think you could see an offensive bonanza in this game despite the cold weather. And I'm encouraged by the likelihood that Green Bay runs the right offense. And Aaron Rodgers is able to make this a game and not allow Seattle to sit on the ball. But I just don't see Green Bay slowing down Seattle when Seattle's on offense. And I do think that Russell Wilson should be perfectly comfortable in the cold weather.
I don't see Philadelphia being able to handle Washington, Bloom.
No.
And you wanted to talk about Kirk Cousins, so let's do that. I want to talk about Rob Kelly. It seems like I talk to my man Lorenzo sitting in the benzo, Lorenzo Doss, like every week about Rob Kelly because, just seeing how he's been able to flourish this season and having Washington and Jay Gruden even saying, like, we're going to feed him some more. So we can talk about the aggression of Philadelphia's defense, but it doesn't matter. If you're running the ball well, you're softening them up. I could see, and regardless of what happens with Jordan Reed, I could see Deshaun Jackson in always a revenge game, hooking up deep. Of course, you get louder with Crowder, Jamison Crowder out there making some plays. Like, this could be a nice one for Washington's side. You said you were excited about Cousins. Bloom, fill us in.
Yeah, and I think that, as you said, whether it's Reed or not, you have a lot of matchups here, Jamison Crowder. Philadelphia, as Matt Waldman's been saying, I think Philly's coaches are reading Matt Waldman because they said our corners are not good.
Should be.
Yeah, our corners are not good. I mean, Philadelphia themselves are saying our cornerback play not good. Pierre Garçon, Deshaun Jackson, Jamison Crowder. Well, those guys can know how to take advantage of not good play, as does Kirk Cousins. Players are getting open by design, by play calls. Kirk Cousins is in tune with this offense. Cousins has been producing regularly. I think he's got 6 or 7 straight games with multiple touchdowns, including his rushing touchdowns. And then you have a Philadelphia team that is playing defense at a league worst level the last 3 weeks. As a team, really, it says the circuit's complete as a swirl down the drain of this Eagles team. Could they, divisional game at home, find some sort of spirit? Sure. Play spoiler? Sure. I don't like to posit reversals, like total 180s at this point in the season. So I think Kirk Cousins is good. And I think you break ties in favor of these Washington receivers and Rob Kelly. And I think Rob Kelly, as you brought up with the Packers game, Rob Kelly's going to be a game script dependent running back. If we expect Washington to control this game, and you get Kelly to 20 carries. The last 3 times he's done that, 21 for 87 and a touch, 22 for 97 against a tough Minnesota run defense. And then the 24 for 137 and 3 against Green Bay. And you just put the lean on them. I think they're going to be able to put the lean on Philly in this game. Now, Philly was pretty stiff against Jeremy Hill. It was at 23 for 32 last week. But there was a point in the Green Bay game where Green Bay had Kelly at 18 for 60 or something like that. So I still think that Washington's offense should be one that fantasy owners toast after week 14. All of these pieces are going to help people advance to the next round.
Matt, let's talk about this game, and let's talk about the flip side to not necessarily the running back situation, which can be summed up like this. And that ain't Jordan after hitting a 3 against the Trailblazers. That's just, I don't know. You really want to trust Ryan Matthews? Week 1 of the fantasy playoffs. Hey, I've always said this for anyone out there. Michael Jordan was as good as a three-point shooter as he needed to be. If he needed to, he'd go out there and shoot threes all day like the soft NBA today. Anyway, if we look at Jordan Matthews, I want to talk about the Jordan Matthews, and the Eagles side of things. And we look at that target count every week except, week 12 against Green Bay, where he had 4. Of course, that's when he was banged up. But before that, 10 targets, 10 targets, 10 targets, 14 targets. Sounds like a nice little trend. Matthews back. You've got, of course, Dorian Green-Beckham a little bit banged up. Is there something to be said there that Wentz has got his guy back, and he'll feature him? So your thoughts here on both sides, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I think first I'd love to just start with Rob Kelly because it's funny. He's the one player I didn't get to see at all, like all off season, all summer. People ask me about him all the time, and I'm going to get to watch him. And every time I go to watch him, I didn't have any tape to see, or I saw something that was so small that I was like, I'm not really going to analyze this. I'm not going to look at that. And then and he's done great. He's the one player I wish I got to watch because as the season has gone on, he has such good agility for his size, and he knows how to use it. He is that downhill power guy who can make good cutbacks. He's got good vision. He really does understand how to set up his blocks and where his blocks are supposed to be and reading his defenders. And I think that makes him a good player, especially for a team that is well balanced. And I agree with Bloom about Kirk Cousins. I mean, I pick on Kirk Cousins relentlessly about certain things, but I've watched him and begrudgingly have admired a lot of what his game has been about. I hate the fact that he does think that he has an elite arm, and in situations where, where now they're going to where and he's pounding it. But where Cousins would be in a situation where he's off balance and he should just throw the ball away, or he should just run. And then he goes, "Oh, I'm Matthew Stafford." And he tries to lay the ball, laser the ball in somewhere, and he ends up throwing interceptions or near interceptions, but he hits just enough of them in a positive way that it encourages him to keep doing it. And it's maddening. But at the same time, with this offense, they most of the time get him to be able to play in a rhythm. I love the way that they can do these 2x2 sets, and they have such good combinations of players on the outside with Crowder and Jackson, or Reed and Davis, or the mixture of any of those 4 players. And they're able to find open players all the time against zone, but at least 3 of those guys in any given coverage can win man on man. So Philly's a little bit more of a man on man defense. But you're going to see some sneaky fun stuff there, because last week, or the last time they played, Vernon Davis got deep on them for a long touchdown on play action off of 2 tight end sets. Now they don't have that anymore with Reed, so it's going to probably be more 2x2 looks, and you're going to have more of that interplay with the tight end and Jackson, and it's going to be that short, deep conundrum that teams are going to have to focus on. And I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being Davis going long for a touchdown in one of these games, because the defense is going to be concerned about Jackson. On the offensive side for Philadelphia, I mean, I agree with you about Matthews being your best bet by far. I mean, certainly Ertz is going to be right up there. But one of the things I've always liked about Matthews too, that's been kind of fun to notice, and I don't know if you guys have or not, but I've never seen someone fake a crossing route before to set up like a corner route or a sail route until he started doing it, even like during the Chip Kelly era. And it worked so well for them that they kept it in the offense under Peterson. And it's something that whenever I watch it, it's like the best route he runs, and it's the only guy that I see who actually runs it consistently and fools people a lot. So that's set up to say that while he's not a great one-on-one receiver, and certainly the Washington plays a fair bit of one-on-one at times, the routes that he runs are so well choreographed that I think that I think it really doesn't matter. I think they're going to be able to find open spots, especially in the middle of the field, where their inside linebackers are okay in coverage, but they're not great. And the safety play, is still okay, but they got young guys too. I mean, Kendall Fuller is going to be a good player, but he still makes some mistakes as a rookie. And if they can get Matthews matched up on him, it should be good. So I like what you guys are thinking there on all accounts.
Bloom, what does Justin Forsett have left in the tank, and will he take over as the lead back for Denver? Here's what I know. The burst looks good. Footwork looks good. Knows the system, knows the verbiage. Kubiak's already said he's going to play. He's going to have the Bibbs role. Well, if that's truly the case, Bibbs was set to take over because I think Booker's not healthy. He doesn't look like it, and certainly not good. I was talking to someone of import, and they said, don't put the cart in front of the horse, but know that Forsett's, going to get some work. So what's he got left in the tank? Because a lot of people say, I cut by 2 teams. Baltimore was procedural, whatever. Detroit, not making an impact in Detroit is a bit of a question mark. And he still loves Hurricane Chris, Bloom. It's what we bumped him in with on the Audible before he was drafted. So what does Forsett have left in the tank?
Enough to be a potential running back 2 or flex play, or certainly someone that you add for depth, or someone that you add to make sure that he can't hurt you on someone else's roster. None of these matchups, Tennessee, New England, KC, strike me as great rushing matchups. The Denver running game hasn't really been that robust. That being said, Forsett just 2 years ago in the Kubiak running game had his best year of his career. He's going to be in shape. He's going to be ready to go. And can he average 4 yards a carry? I think so. And you said you're going to get enough of Forsett to see where he stands. I don't think it'll be that hard for him to look better than Booker. Bibbs was looking better than Booker. So maybe not this week. Maybe Forsett's just a desperation play this week. But the next 2 weeks, he could easily go in as the lead back or the favored back in a committee. And it's opportunity by design because of Denver's offense not really being, not letting a lot hang out there in the passing game because of their quarterbacks. It's because of their defense, obviously keeping the game close and low scoring. That Forsett is, as we talked about on the waiver wire show, when the news came through that they picked up Forsett, I thought, well, that's interesting. He's worth an ad. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, there's potential impact here, and it's not difficult to tell that story. League-winning impact, no. But quality, depth, and we look at the running back 2 picture, it's a mess. So guys like Lamar Miller, can I see Justin Forsett being someone you would start over Lamar Miller next week or the week after? Absolutely.
Yeah, I see that. And this team, better spot than if they would have got Hillman back by getting Forsett, in my opinion. Matt, let's talk about the Browns and the Bengals. Now, Randy in our chat room here on the Audible Live has said he's got a bad feeling about Cincinnati. And know this, all DFS players and certainly a lot of fantasy owners, they've been waiting for this. I got Andy Dalton. I'm going Andy Dalton and start everybody against the Browns. And, Eifert, yeah, we're going to have people dissect. Is it Brandon LaFell week or is it Tyler Boyd week? How do the Browns respond with Robert Griffin III? Let's focus on that. People, what about Corey Coleman? What about Terrell Pryor? And what about these Browns and these Bengals? The Bengals come out a little flat, or do they hammer them like most people think they will?
I think they come out a little flat, and I think that's mainly because the leadership of that offense is an inconsistent player, and that's probably where that goes. And they should be capable of being able to pull away from the Browns, but let's remember this, that Cleveland seems to play the teams tight in the first half. And it's not like they just roll over and die, most of the time when it comes to playing the game. And you have a lot of player loyalty to Hugh Jackson. I mean, the fact that Terrell Pryor, to me, who might be one of the top 3 possible free agents available at the skill positions next year, basically said, I want to stay in Cleveland as long as Hugh Jackson is still there. That should tell you right then and there that this team, there's some loyalty to Jackson among the players. So the thing about it is that because of Joe Hayden being pretty good and they don't have AJ Green, he's going to be able to cover Brandon LaFell. I'm not really worried about Brandon LaFell against Joe Hayden. Joe Hayden isn't the best cover corner in the league, but he's still pretty darn good. And LaFell is okay. He's an okay second receiver. He's not a primary guy. He's going to get volume, but he's not going to beat Hayden deep, most likely. That means Eifert's probably going to be the big guy to own there because, the safety play is suspect in Cleveland. And then you also have, probably going to have enough time downfield to be able to find him for some bigger plays. And I think the run game obviously will get going. If it doesn't get going immediately, it will get going within by the end of the second quarter, I would imagine, with Jeremy Hill or even Rex Burkhead, if Rex Burkhead gets to play a little bit more, because there's makings of some good stuff going on there, but it's not great. And even a guy like Jamie Collins has been called out for having to play a little bit harder and admitted as such, as he's joined in there. But when you look at the offensive side for Cleveland, where it becomes interesting and keeps it more of a tight game is Robert Griffin, his ability to avoid pressure and that deep arm, the ability to go outside. If they can hit early with Coleman and Pryor up the sidelines, they're going to be in good shape. And I think that Pryor is still your best bet because he's consistently been able to beat some of the better cornerbacks in the league all year long, even with the quarterback play that he's had. The problem is that he's not as multidimensional of a player for you in Cleveland with Robert Griffin until Griffin proves that he can throw in the middle of the field. And he seems to have issues with that for a while now since, teams have kind of figured out Mike Shanahan's read option system, and he wasn't being able to find Pierre Garçon streaking down the middle of the field and Aldrick Robinson wide open because of the teams didn't know what to expect at first. Now everyone uses it, and the middle of the field seems to be like a cloudy mess for Griffin, and he's got to figure that out. And it may take another off season or two for him to really do that. So you get a puncher's chance with Griffin, and if he can hit some plays early enough and they can stay in this game, there's a possibility that, that Dalton kind of, can't figure out what to do in the second half and can't summon the troops. And then this team becomes, one blunder after another. But I'd say the odds of that happening are probably closer to 35% than they are to 75%.
Bloom, is it blunder or blunderbuss for the Bengals against the Browns?
I would trust Dalton unless you have an obvious quarterback to play over him. Looking for snow here, by the way. We'll see what the conditions are like. We'll watch the reports on Sunday morning. I don't expect it to be that big of a deal. I think that Eifert is someone for DFS you would look at absolutely now. Or if you have Eifert as your second tight end, you look at flexing him. Jeremy Hill is an easy play this week. He had 9 for 168 in the first matchup between these teams. I think that Johnny Bernard also had a very successful day. So Rex Burkhead, if you're getting really deep, is someone you look at here. LaFell and Boyd are, well, see, so I'll put it this way. LaFell and Boyd have the same roughly same range of outcomes this week as Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders. Maybe 3 or 4 for 40 or 50, maybe 6 or 7 for 80 or 90 and a touchdown. That and I trust Andy Dalton more than Trevor Siemian or Paxton Lynch at this point, weather being that factor. I'm really interested to see what Robert Griffin III does. I still think that we can look back at that first week. A few weeks later, Ben Roethlisberger came into Philly, looked worse than Griffin did. You got Corey Coleman now, additional with this offense. Terrell Pryor, his vertical element gets unlocked again. They had beautiful pitch and catch chemistry in the preseason, then in that first game. Isaiah Crowell, a factor potentially in this game. We've seen some wild and woolly Cleveland Cincy games over the years. I'd love to see Cleveland keep this one close, and RG3 maybe fence a little bit in a way. You could feel it just watching the games. Like Josh McCown was a lead weight dragging this offense down, and Cody Kessler's just limited. He's just a very limited player. So I would not say that Robert Griffin III is limited in terms of stretching the field, in terms of using his running ability as something to leverage a defense. There's parts of as Matt describes, I think he lacks poise. The game is not speaking to him yet in terms of a pocket passing, but Hugh Jackson can scheme. And I'm excited to watch Griffin in this one. And in December, hopefully we get to see him play all 4 games in December to see what he can actually do with Hugh Jackson.
Bloom Gina asks that about Tyler Lockett. She has Tyler Boyd, but Tyler Lockett's on waivers. Should she drop Boyd for Lockett?
Yes. And I have Lockett as my number 27 receiver this week. No. Look, can Tyler Boyd change the outcome of your season? No. Tyler Lockett, even if you don't play him this week, Tyler Lockett you're going to watch. If he does what he did last week, this week, and he's saying, hey, my knee's better, I'm feeling it, then you're playing him in week 15. And if you hit again like a hot shooter at the craps table, playing him again in week 16. Tyler Lockett could change the outcome of your season. Tyler Boyd can't do that.
Jordan in his prime. Jordan in his comeback. Now you got me thinking about the craps table, Matt.
I'd be glad to apologize for telling you to bench Tyler Boyd. I'd apologize. I'd apologize 1,000 times for that and still have a smile on my face about the fact that happened, rather than saying, yeah, pass over Tyler Lockett. No way. His knee already looks healthy to me. He already shows a lot of burst in the kick return game already, and they're targeting him on those plays where he's been able to get downfield or at least be able to make plays after the catch. So I think that confidence is back.
In a half-point PPR, final question, Matt, is Dion Lewis worth starting as a flex?
I'm starting him right now in the league for that very reason. When you look at Baltimore, even though it's the top-ranked run defense in the league, you have to understand that they aren't very good against running backs out of the backfield. You see that running backs out of the backfield, some of their game logs, you look back there, and there's some decent yardage to be found there for backs who can get, maybe 30, 40 yards rushing, but they also get, 40 to 50 yards receiving. And I think that Dion Lewis could be just the guy in this particular game to get a heavier workload than he has. And it has been a few weeks now that he's been back on the field and he's looked good. And the Patriots may go, look, well, Rob Gronkowski's out. We still have Bennett, who's nursing that ankle and can barely put any weight on it when he's trying to drive block. Let's just go 2-by-2 and put Lewis out there, let him get in space. We'll run some draw plays. We'll do some different things, and we can be a little trickier with him, a little more versatile, and we can lean on him more now that we're down the stretch, and he looks good. So that's my gut feeling is that he has a big day.
Just because he's in the chat room right now. What up, Big Worm? Bloom, let's get a game update before we're out.
Yeah, Oakland, and I wouldn't blame you if you started Derek Carr because he looked pretty good last week. Didn't seem like the pinky was affecting him against Buffalo. Helped that comeback. I don't know if it's the pinky or not, but he's not hitting anything downfield in this game. And they have 3 times they've taken over after turnovers on the KC side of the field and scored 6 points. That's basically the difference in the game right now. Now, in field position was starting to favor Oakland, and then Kansas City, Alex Smith going downfield again, throwing it out of the end zone to Travis Kelce, who has his 4th straight 100-yard game. I hope you weren't worried about Travis Kelce because Jeremy Maclin was back. So we're 12-27 and counting. Alex Smith just converted a 3rd down scramble, and they're across midfield now. At this point, there's very little. I'm about to bloom you, Chiefs. There's very little sign that Oakland has. Oakland's. You would have said the way this game's been going. You said, well, if Oakland gets some turnovers, they got the turnovers. It's not changing the outcome of this game. I mean, if Alex Smith decides to throw one to a Raider again, who can then return it? Eric Berry style, maybe. But Oakland's offense isn't doing anything. Kansas City is getting their nerve back on offense, and it looks like Kansas City's going to take over that driver's seat for the number 2 seed. They're going to take over the driver's seat for the AFC West. And, of course, this is a great outcome for Denver, who I believe controls their own destiny. I'm not sure exactly how the tiebreakers will work out if they win out.
San Diego's going to play spoiler in this division because San Diego plays everyone except Denver left. Yeah. And if they can win against Oakland or win against Kansas City, which they can, and Denver wins out, Tom Brady's like 2-7 at Mile High. Right. So, Brady up next week, then KC in Arrowhead, then at home against Oakland. Win all the ones that are in front of you, and you'll be in the catbird seat, as DeMarcus Ware said.
Yeah, so this AFC West has been this is the most intriguing AFC West year I can remember, and it's going to stay intriguing right down to the end.
Yeah, because for 5 years it's been like, oh, the Broncos and whatever else. Oh, Kansas City make a little run. Hey, Matt, some sage-like wisdom, some final thoughts here. Week 1 of the fantasy playoffs. What's going on in the mind of Matt Waldman?
Well, usually there's some uncontrolled id thing going on, so we will try and suppress that as much as we can with the ego. I will say that probably when I thought that Danny Tucito had some really great advice a couple of weeks ago about dance with the guys that brung you. And it kind of echoes what you were talking about at the beginning of this show, Cecil, which is, starting your studs, and that sometimes going with that, looking at bad matchups and trying to go with somebody else because you're worried about a bad matchup statistically doesn't pay off for you. And so I think that's a really good piece of advice to consider as kind of a good kind of tenet for what you're going to follow down the line here. But the other thing too is I would just, really just some of the things that we're seeing with the show, talking about in the show, Bloom talking about picking up guys like Forsett and holding on to there. You should be active on your waiver wire if you have one, and picking up players who may be able to help you out in case of an injury, in case of, in case of the fact that you have a team with a weakness that upsets a team that you're going to face, and they could have ended up picking up a guy like Forsett, or rookies who seem to have a rapport with, youthful quarterbacks like Robbie Anderson being a guy that Bryce Pitty's going to throw to early, often, and always, and downfield, and he's liable to catch one of them just like Ted Ginn, So it's one of those deals where I think that playing the waiver wire and looking for him, not so much as to get too cute with your starters, but to maybe play keep away from your opponents and have an injury insurance plan is always helpful. So those are the things that I look at, and again, going with your gut. You're going to ask questions. You're going to have some difficult situations that you're going to look to for advice. And I would just say to you that if you're good with your gut, go with that. If you're going to ask one of us a question and we give you an answer different than what you think, and your first response is to want to give a counterpoint and a second counterpoint, then your answer. Go with the one that you're thinking, because we don't know your teams as well as you do. And you're probably watching these guys more than we are, in terms of the specific ones that you're considering. And if you're not, and you don't know, and you're probably more likely to accept our answer the first time around, because you haven't been watching, and that's okay too. But I would say if you have that gut feeling and you know your players, stay with that, because you'll feel a lot better, making the choices that you did, rather than listen to somebody else and losing by a small amount.
Matt, my friend, you have a knack for things, the gut check, rookie scouting portfolio. And tonight you described this show perfectly when you said sneaky fun stuff. So that's what we do. You listen to the Audible, you can have sneaky fun, a sneaky good time, Bloom. We sneak up on you.
Yeah, you come for the Bugs Bunny outro, and you stay for the squirrel talk and trying to get Dr. Gene crying, and you want to help make it weird, really, because it's only weird when we make it weird. And basically, I don't know how we ever do this without making it weird. So if you're here, you like for it to be weird too. It's fantasy football, and in some ways we do this just to keep our minds off of the decisions that we know we're going to mess up in some way.
There you have it. He's
Jack Del Rio hour.
You follow him on Twitter at Sigmund Bloom. Follow Matt at Matt Waldman. Dr. Gene Brammel's awesome at Gene Brammel. I'm at Cecil Lammy Shows at the Audible. Thank you guys very much. Thank you and good night. Good day, sir. And as always, stay frosty, people.